So coming up this weekend is going to be UFC Edmonton, which is going to be an event taking place in an arena in front of a crowd in Canada, but I do have quite a few things to address in this intro before I get into my predictions, so it might be a little bit of a longer intro. Firstly, my affiliate code with We Want Picks has kind of changed. Now there is no 3-day free trial anymore, and the reason why is just because people were exploiting it to get extra, I guess you could say, permissions in the Discord, and then exploiting those permissions in the Discord as someone that was a premium member. If you know what I mean, if you know what I mean, and people were just kind of exploiting it in the Discord, so a couple of bad eggs have now changed it, but I think it probably is for the best, because now you can get a 10% discount if you do sign up using my code ARTEM. You still support my channel in the same way, which is great, and you get a 10% off monthly, you get 10% off yearly, and there is lifetime as well, so if you wanted to sign up yearly, you get 10% off, and now it's $9 per month using my code ARTEM as well for that We Want Picks premium membership service. So I think overall does end up being a bit of a win-win, but there is no free trial anymore because unfortunately a couple of people did ruin it for everyone else. The next one was UFC 308. My picks were okay in hindsight. I mean, I probably should have picked Chimaev, but there still was a lot of drama leading up to it. He was still in hospital 4 months ago, but the cope is real. I did pick Whittaker. Wasn't the great pick, but hey, it is what it is. Comes out, gets the sub in round 1, and probably fights DDP next, unless they're going to try and do something else, like Sean Strickland, I don't know. And then aside from that, I think that Ismail Nurdiev did beat Bruno Silva, and Mutabik Urubai lost, but aside from that, went pretty good on everything else. In the main event, as I said, Max Holloway was landing more volume against Ilia Topuria. I thought that overall he was looking like the better striker against Ilia Topuria, and then Topuria, once again, just with his very, very heavy pressure style and his power, lands on Max Holloway, and I think a lot of people are going to be shocked by that, but at the end of the day, the sportsbooks had Ilia Topuria by KO as the most likely outcome for anything to happen. I just wish you got the sub, because if you've been in the Discord, you know that I am betting again, and I did bet on Ilia Topuria sub. It was like plus 550 or something like that. It is what it is. But yeah, I think Ilia Topuria is going to be a champion for a long time. I would rather see Diego Lopez fight Ilia Topuria, I'll be honest with you guys, just because we've already seen the Volk fight. I don't think the result would be different. But honestly, I think Ilia Topuria would knock out Diego Lopez, because we just saw Dan Ige, who just got beaten by Lerone Murphy, was boxing up Diego Lopez. And I just think, like, MMA math, you can just MMA math it out. I think Topuria KOs Lopez as well, and I love Lopez. But now let's look into this card. UFC Fight Night, Moreno versus Albazi, taking place in Canada, in front of a crowd. I have a couple of underdogs picked, which always makes me nervous, but it is what it is. Let's get into it. Jack Shaw is fighting against Youssef Zalal. Youssef Zalal has looked incredible since being released from the UFC a few years ago. Went on a pretty decent regional scene run. Fought for like a pretty odd tournament, I think it was. It was like boxing, kickboxing, and then MMA, I believe, all in the same night, which is kind of insane. So maybe shout out to Sparta for that. But he did have a couple of decent wins on the regional scene, and then won that tournament as well. And then we saw him go out there and choke out Billy Quarantillo on short notice, and since then it's kind of been off to the races. And now he gets a bit of a step up in competition against Jack Shaw, who, I will say it again, I don't like him at 145 pounds. Jack Shaw is definitely a bantamweight in my eyes. I still, even when he did it initially, years ago, a couple of years ago when he moved up to 145, I didn't like the move then, and I still don't like the move now. You know, Joanderson Brito did just beat him recently. It was kind of controversial, but he still looked small in there. Brito was still landing on him. Now he takes on Youssef Zalal, who's a very aggressive boxer and grappler, is going to have a bit of a size advantage on him again, as every featherweight in the division is going to over Jack Shaw. And Jack Shaw doesn't really have like too much danger to present on the feet, and I think that Zalal, despite really kind of coming into his grappling, is probably going to find the most success with his high pressure boxing style. And I actually do think that Zalal can land on the feet and get takedowns towards the end of the round, and probably defend the takedowns of Jack Shaw. So I do like Youssef Zalal to win this one here. And he is a pretty sizable favourite. You're no longer going to be getting Zalal at good prices. He's minus 230, Jack Shaw's plus 190. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I just don't like Shaw at 145 pounds. And now we have the opposite. We have Charles Jourdain fighting Victor Henry down at 135 pounds. And I don't really want to give you guys a high confidence pick here. This is a very low confidence prediction for me because I have picked Charles Jourdain so many times. And he has lost so many times. And every time I watch him, I think, man, like this guy just isn't as dynamic. He's not as fast. He's not as good as I just keep thinking that he is, and he keeps letting me down. So I'm sorry, Charles Jourdain, but man, like I have picked him to I did pick him to lose to Gene Silver, obviously, but I did pick him to beat Sean Woodson. I didn't think he looked that good against Sean Woodson. He did sub Ricardo Ramos very quickly. That was cool. But now he takes on Victor Henry, who, as we all know, had that crazy performance against Jaume Barcelos on super short notice. Then took quite a bit of time away, lost to a Sunsao in a really weird fight, which had a lot of grappling in it. And then we've kind of just seen him since then, really. I think that Victor Henry can beat Charles Jourdain if he can just kind of put that high volume on him again. We haven't really seen Victor Henry put that same amount of volume on anyone since he has actually did do that initial short notice Jaume Barcelos fight. But I do think that we can see Victor Henry go out there against Charles Jourdain and work the body early, and I do think that Jourdain coming down to 135, I've never really thought of Jourdain being a small featherweight necessarily, so I think the weight cut really could maybe drain him a little bit. I'm sure he's put himself in a fantastic shape to make the weight, but I think that on the feet, Victor Henry, he is going to be at a danger because Jourdain still does hit hard and he does present a very tough submission threat. But I think that Victor Henry can, on the feet, find a success and maybe even get his own takedowns and just try to avoid those defensive submissions that Jourdain does have. This is a pick'em, I believe. I think it's -110 either way. I'm going to go with Victor Henry, but we have seen quite recently that a lot of these older guys are now starting to lose. But it is what it is. I do think that Henry can just kind of get by a decision here against Charles Jourdain. And as you can see, the Tapology picks are very, very split on it as well. That is not a confident pick at all. And then we move up to Aimann Zahabi fighting against Pedro Munhoz. And I was kind of thinking to myself, man, like Aimann Zahabi, maybe he can kind of become something. And I did not realize he is nearly 37 years old. I mean, that age just kind of caught up to me. I didn't realize that Aimann Zahabi was 36. But of course, Aimann Zahabi is coming off probably one of the best performances of his career when he did defeat Javid Basharat as a pretty sizable underdog. I didn't see it coming. I don't think many people saw it coming, but in hindsight, Zahabi actually was a pretty good matchup to defeat Javid Basharat, wasn't he? With his very good boxing sort of style. He does have very good defense as well. We have seen that against opponents like I need Tapology to help me. Ricky Tercios. I mean, Ricky Tercios did miss a lot of strikes in that fight, but we have seen Zahabi find success against pretty difficult matchups before, and he knocked out Achilan too. He takes on Pedro Munhoz, who is now, I would say, taking on a big step down in competition. Pedro Munhoz has really kind of just been a staple of the rankings for a very, very long time, and for lack of a better term, he has been a journeyman for these ranked up-and-coming contenders. If you can beat Pedro Munhoz, you're going to become something. Like, we look at, I'm looking for it. We look at his fight against Sean O'Malley. You know, Sean O'Malley become the champion, even though it wasn't really anything. Dominic Cruz beat him. Jose Aldo beat him. Aljamain Sterling beat him and become the champion. Yeah, anyways. Marlon Vera beat him and fought for the title against Sean O'Malley. But Pedro Munhoz has kind of always been a pretty tough guy for a lot of people to deal with. And we did see it against Chris Gutierrez, who just kind of proved that he was a little bit too much too soon for Gutierrez. Pedro Munhoz is a very good boxer still, and he has a very, very good pressure forward style. He does have his chin kind of high up in the air with his hands pretty low, but he does have very good movement, and even now that he's getting a little bit older, still has presented a little bit of a challenge for a lot of these guys. Now, Kyler Phillips was able to beat him, and Kyler Phillips didn't look very good against Rob Font, so I guess if you really wanted to MMA math that out, but Rob Font is still, like Pedro Munhoz, a pretty gritty veteran in his own right. But I do think in this matchup, we just saw Aimann Zahabi have the best performance of his career. We know that Aimann Zahabi has that legendary coach in his corner, GSP's coach, whose name has slipped my mind, unfortunately. I think that this is kind of Zahabi's big opportunity to put himself into the rankings, and I do think he is going to pass the test. I'm not as confident in Munhoz as I think a lot of other people are going to be, and if I do look at the odds right now, Aimann Zahabi is actually the underdog, and I think that does make sense, but I am going to go with the guy who I think has all of the momentum right now, and we did just see Pedro Munhoz kind of take a little bit of a step back in his last couple of fights. I don't think we're going to see a finish in this one here. I think it's going the distance. Looks like the majority of the public's on Zahabi as well, so it'll be interesting to see what other people think of the fight, but I do like Zahabi to defeat Munhoz in this one here. Now we have Serhiy Sidey fighting against Garrett Armfield. I'm going to pick Garrett Armfield, and he is the underdog as well. If we look at the odds, Garrett Armfield's plus 140 right now on BetOnline, and Serhiy Sidey's minus 160. I just can't trust Serhiy Sidey. You know, this is a guy who just has no fight IQ. He just doesn't. In fact, maybe some of the worst fight IQ in the promotion. I'd almost be willing to put it out there. If you do watch his tape, yes, he doesn't actually have that many submissions, but if you look into this guy on the regional scene, he does find a lot of success with his very tricky and odd sort of Muay Thai style, but he also has proven multiple times that he can wrestle and he can grapple. He goes out there against Romanov, who has, in his own right, kind of proven to not really have the best wrestling and grappling. Well, at that point, you know, we've seen Tavares find success in the UFC since, and he knocks him out in a very kind of early stoppage. It was controversial, so they did the rematch, and he didn't look to take down Tavares at all until it was too late, and he just accepted losing to Tavares and getting boxed up on the feet by Ramon Tavares, and now he's taking on Garrett Armfield, who can box and he can wrestle. Now, I think that in this matchup, Garrett Armfield can mix it up. Now, he is taking on a very rangy, very, very awkward Muay Thai style, which is Serhiy Sidey. He does have a very awkward striking style, but if times get tough on the feet, Garrett Armfield's going to wrestle, you know, Serhiy Sidey probably won't. And then I think that we're going to see Garrett Armfield kind of mix it up here as the underdog. We've seen Garrett Armfield win as an underdog before as well when he did defeat Brad Katona, which is aging to be a pretty decent win, I would say. I mean, Katona just had that close fight with Jin Matsumoto. He did lose to High Stand, but High Stand is like a pretty decent wrestler, even though I have personally underrated him for nearly his whole career now, I would honestly say. Serhiy Sidey, we just saw him get boxed up pretty badly by Ramon Tavares. Now, I do know for the most part, Sidey's nose was broken and he was just bleeding everywhere, but Tavares still found a lot of success in that fight on the feet. And I think that Garrett Armfield, we've seen that Garrett Armfield can box people up before. He smoked Toshiomi Kazama on the feet. You know, to be fair, not really the best striker, but I think that we can see Armfield find success in the boxing by closing the distance and getting the wrestling going as well. I do like Armfield to win this one here. I just cannot trust Serhiy Sidey because his fight IQ really let me down in the matchup against Ramon Tavares in the last Canadian pay-per-view. Now we have Alexandr Romanov fighting against Rodrigo Nascimento. I believe this is a little bit of a rebooking, like a reshuffling. I believe, yes, Romanov was meant to fight against Derrick Lewis. Now he's taking on Nascimento, and now Derrick Lewis is going to be fighting against Jhonata Diniz later on into this card on the main card. Romanov, once a very promising prospect, I'll let you guys know. And once a guy that was weighing in at around like 230 pounds. This guy has really kind of fluctuated his weight. And I believe at the moment, he's at his biggest that we have seen him. Like his weigh-in here was, what was it, 265 against Almeida. He weighed in here, 265. But we have seen him weigh in a little bit lower, 239.5 against Tybura, 236.5 against Chase Sherman. You know, so he just put on 30 kilos, and so 30 pounds. But the thing is, when he put on those 30 pounds, he didn't put on 30 pounds like Jailton Almeida would put on 30 pounds. He put on 30 pounds like Alexandr Romanov would eat 30 pounds. That's 30 pounds of burgers right there. That's not 30 pounds of muscle. So, yeah, old Romanov. He just hasn't had a good run of it recently, but he was at one point really, really promising, and he did dominate Marcin Tybura in the wrestling, and Tybura has since gone on to look pretty good at heavyweight. So I do kind of wonder, can Romanov really get back to that? We did just see him lose a striking match. No, not to Almeida, against Ivanov. He striked with him. Ignore all that. This thing as well against Romanov, he took one takedown against Volkov, and then he gassed out in one takedown attempt. let's talk about Nascimento. Nascimento just lost to Derrick Lewis. In that fight, actually was probably winning the fight before the third round happened, and Derrick Lewis knocked him out pretty quickly with a big one and like a massive overhand right. But before that, we did see him find some success in the clinch against Lewis, even took down Derrick Lewis. On the feet, was landing a couple of shots, but wasn't really doing too crazy on the feet because he's not really a striker. He is a wrestler. We have seen him found some pretty good success in the UFC before. He was a bit of a naughty boy in the past, but since then he did beat Dante Ormez and Ilir Latifi. I don't know, man. Like, here's the thing. Romanov's the underdog, and I'm sitting here. I was going to pick Romanov before starting recording the video, and I'm going to pick Romanov still. I mean, I think that Romanov can get the takedowns against Nascimento here. And if he does get takedowns, he is dominant. Now, unfortunately for Romanov, his strength of schedule, I was just picking on Nascimento. His ain't that strong. What did he do? Beat Chase Sherman, who fought him on short notice. Jared Vandera, you know, like, he hasn't really got the best resume either. And Old Man Ivanov, that was a striking fight for the most part. It was an odd one. But I do think that Romanov can get the takedowns against Nascimento. Let's move on from that mess and move up to Ariane Lipski fighting against Jasmine Jasudavicius. Jasmine Jasudavicius is pretty good. Now, she is nearly 36 years old, but she just kind of keeps winning. She did have that one pretty bad loss to Tracy Cortez, where Tracy Cortez looked like she made like massive boxing improvements, and it kind of seems like maybe she hadn't. But she did bounce back recently with a couple of massive wins, and I actually did pick Fatima Klein on short notice to defeat her, and hindsight's 2020, I know, but Fatima Klein is actually one of those prospects that I was like super high on, and I thought, man, like, I think she can do it. She couldn't outgrapple Jasmine Jasudavicius. Jasmine Jasudavicius was able to outgrapple her in a lot of the moments on that fight, and she just was a significantly bigger fighter than the short notice strawweight Fatima Klein. But coping aside, Jasmine Jasudavicius, she can strike, but I don't think that's a very big strong suit of her. She really is a good wrestler. She is a Canadian national wrestling champion, but she is going to take on a pretty dangerous grappler in Ariane Lipski, who does have very good defensive submissions and very good submission ability off her back. Ariane Lipski, she has got a lot of armbars in her career so far, just armbarred Casey O'Neill, which is pretty good, and knee-barred Luana Carolina. And I thought that she had another one. She has quite a few in the KSW. But nonetheless, these are submissions that you can get off your back. And I do believe that Lipski, as long as the fight is on the ground, is going to be throwing up some pretty dangerous submission attempts. But I do think that this fight is going to take place on the ground, and I think if it takes place on the ground, the fighter on top is going to be Jasmine Jasudavicius, and the fighter doing the damage is going to be Jasmine Jasudavicius, as she does throw ground and pound with her wrestling, which is quite good to see. Ariane Lipski does have that Muay Thai striking style. She does kick from range quite well, and Jasmine, as we do know, is pretty slow and typically is a little bit of one step behind on the feet, but I don't think it's really going to matter in this one here because Jasmine is pretty big for the weight class at 125 pounds, and I think that she can get the takedowns against Lipski, maybe land some strikes of her own, but I think the ground and pound and the control on top is probably what's going to decide this fight for Jasmine Jasudavicius, so I'm going to pick her as the favorite. I think she's minus 170. I actually expected her to maybe be a little bit wider, but it seems like a lot of people are respecting the finishing ability of Ariane Lipski because Ariane Lipski can find those submissions. Now we move up to two of the older Canadians at bantamweight. As you know, Cody Gibson's not a Canadian. Ignore that. Two of the older fighters at bantamweight. Chad Anheliga, nearly 38 years old at this point. When he defeated Muin Gafarov, I was like, man, I don't know how this guy's going to go in the UFC because I did actually think Muin won the fight, but it is what it is. Defeated Muin Gafarov there in that fight. I guess damage still does trump all, and I'm always a little bit of an advocate for the damage only scoring criteria. So maybe I can't cope too hard about that pick, which was incorrect. 3 years ago though, and then he beat Jesse Strader, absolute legend. What's his name? The guy with the massive hands loves Jesse Strader. Knocked him out, knocked him down 8 times, I think, but just managed to get that win over Charalampus Grigoriou, who just lost to Toshiomi Kazama. Yikes. I do think that Cody Gibson wins this one. Cody Gibson went to war with Brad Katona, and I know it's Brad Katona who just isn't really the best striker in the world, but I thought that he looked pretty decent. I thought that he kind of showcased the fact that he would be willing to stand and trade. He did gas out a lot against Brad Katona, but this was an absolutely insane matchup, and he did land a lot of volume on Katona pretty early. I think that Cody Gibson is a pretty decent long-rangey striker, even though he really does find a lot of his wins in the grappling department. In this matchup, Chad Anheliga is going to look for wrestling. He shoots takedowns all of the time. He just out-wrestled Charalampus Grigoriou, which is why I picked Toshiyama Kazama to defeat him. Madness. But I do think that Cody Gibson can find success in this fight here. Now, I do think that Cody Gibson is going to get taken down in moments in this matchup, but he does have pretty good, decent get-ups against guys who I don't think are going to be as good at wrestling as someone like Miles Johns or Brad Katona. And I think even then when the fight's on the ground, he is going to present some sort of submission threat. We just saw him submit Brian Kelleher. I think that we can see him go out there, land strikes from range, because this guy is massive for 135 pounds at 5'10" with a 71-inch reach. And I think that he can defeat Chad Anheliga from range and just kind of try to avoid the takedowns. But if the fight does go down to the ground, he's going to throw up submissions anyway. I do believe that we are seeing Cody Gibson as a bit of a favorite here. He is minus 175. Chad Anheliga's plus 150. There is a path to victory for Chad because he does still have pretty good cardio and pretty good wrestling, and he is a tough matchup for a lot of guys. But I do think in this one here, in the battle of the unks, I guess you could say, I think that Cody Gibson is going to win a decision by doing more damage with the range on the feet. Now, this fight is quite funny. It's Jamie Lyn-Horth fighting against Ivana Petrovic, and the reason why I think that it might be a little bit funny is because you just look at the Tapology votes, and 84% of people are picking Ivana Petrovic, and I cannot see it, and the odds makers don't see it either. We're looking at minus 200 now on Jamie Lyn-Horth. Yeah, Jamie Lyn-Horth is minus 200, so a lot of the public like the sizable underdog here in Ivana Petrovic, but I like Jamie Lyn-Horth here because I think that she is going to just be the bully in the fight. We just saw Ivana Petrovic come back with a pretty decent win against Ali Young, but she did get bullied by Luana Carolina, and I picked Petrovic with a pretty decent amount of confidence against Luana Carolina, and it looks like I was the idiot, right? But the thing about Jamie Lyn-Horth is she did fight on short notice, upper weight class, against Hayley Cowan, and she looked good in that matchup. She was able to outstrike Hayley Cowan from range, who is very controversial figure, actually, if you know. Yeah, there's probably a lot going on, Hayley. Anyways, let's move on. She beat Hayley Cowan. She defended a lot of takedowns. There was Hayley Cowan kind of has proven to only have wrestling, though. She doesn't really have striking at all. And she did lose to Veronica Hardy, but Veronica Hardy, since being married and trained by Dan Hardy, seems to have just gone on like a generational run. I think that Jamie Lyn-Horth can bully Petrovic here. Petrovic did not like the pressure of Carolina. She didn't like the volume of Carolina. She didn't like the grappling of Carolina. And although I don't really consider Jamie Lyn-Horth to really be like as imposing as Carolina can be, I think that she can go out there and just pressure Petrovic and kind of bully her, to be honest with you. So I do like Jamie Lyn-Horth to win the decision here in this matchup as the favorite, but the underdog on the Tapology vote. Now we can move up to Mike Malott fighting against Trevin Giles. I really thought about just picking against Mike Malott because this guy has really let us down, has he not? He just lost to Neil Magny as, I believe, a plus 300 underdog, no, minus 400 favorite he was when he lost to Neil Magny. But in that fight, yes, Magny was presenting some trouble on the feet. The strikes were pretty even, but Malott did get 4 takedowns on Neil Magny out of 6 attempts. He's now going to take on Trevin Giles, and Trevin Giles is kind of like another one of those guys who just doesn't take easy fights. I don't know what's going on. Maybe he just doesn't get offered easy fights. This is a guy who fought Gabriel Bonfim when Bonfim was really on the come up at 14-0. And then Trevin Giles just fought the prospect Carlos Prates, who is now going to headline an event against Neil Magny, I believe actually the week after this one, if my UFC order is correct in my head. Trevin Giles, though, just beat Preston Parsons as well. That was his most recent win, and he kind of did it with the jab, and that really is the story of Trevin Giles striking, is he does have a pretty nice jab that he can land pretty regularly, and on the feet, let's be honest, he was finding a lot of success against Carlos Prates before Carlos Prates did end up knocking him out, but I guess that kind of is the story of how Carlos Prates does fight. Mike Malott, as we know, was and probably still is a bit of a prospect. He's getting a little bit old to be like labeled as a prospect, but he still definitely could become something in this weight class in the top 15 if he can get by Trevin Giles. He is the grappling coach at Team Alpha Male, and I did actually pick him to win his Contender Series fight kind of just based on that fact, I'll be honest with you guys, against Szymon Swiatkowski, and that worked out pretty well. And since then, he has gone on to find a lot of success, but he took that big step up against Neil Magny, and now is kind of taking that step down. But Trevin Giles is no easy guy to defeat. Trevin Giles can wrestle. I would describe his style kind of mostly being a striker, though. I'll be honest with you guys, if he takes on a grappler, he's going to want to keep the fight on the feet, but he can wrestle offensively if he needs to. But I think that Mike Malott can get the takedowns here. He has disappointed me. He has disappointed you probably as well. And we do have to worry about the cardio a little bit, because the last time he was in the spotlight was against Neil Magny. He gassed out. He got finished in the third round, at the very end of the third round, because he had nothing left after getting and shooting those takedowns. But I still like the grappling of Malott. We haven't really seen Trevin Giles take on someone with this kind of level of danger in the grappling, aside from Bonfim, but I just don't see Malott pulling guillotine. I mean, he did, though. That's the thing about Swiatkowski. I mean, I'm not going to pick someone based on a guillotine, but I am going to pick Mike Malott based on the grappling in general. At the end of the day, he still got 75% of his takedowns against Neil Magny. And Neil Magny does typically have not the greatest takedown defense, but getting 75% of your takedowns on Neil Magny, I think that's definitely going to say something here, and I do think he can take down Trevin Giles, and when he does, he's going to try and get that back, and I think that he can find the submission over Trevin Giles. Another thing about Malott as well, when he beat Adam Fugit, I should say, he was a step ahead in the striking. He was a step ahead. He could tell what Adam Fugit was going to throw before he even threw back. So Malott was fast on the feet, but I think that Giles is a better striker than Adam Fugit. I think that jab has given a lot of people trouble in the past, but I'm going to pick Malott by submission. Now we have Derrick Lewis fighting against Jhonata Diniz. First thing I thought when I looked at this fight was Jhonata Diniz is going to win. But then I started watching tape on Jhonata Diniz, because the thing is, when he fought in the Contender Series last year, I very explicitly remember mentioning that Jhonata Diniz, yes, he's a glory kickboxer, by the way. He's slow, and he has still looked pretty slow in his UFC run so far. Now, you can see here he was in glory, clearly, and he found a lot of success in the kickboxing world, come over to MMA, and has looked very, very good. But the thing is, he is slow, and the reason why he's slow is he just doesn't react. Like, his defense kind of doesn't exist. He just has, like, a massive head that he just doesn't move. Even Carl Williams, who, very controversial kind of fight this was, because Carl Williams claimed that he was told by the UFC not to wrestle, or else he wasn't going to get another contract, and now he's out of the promotion. But anyway, Jhonata Diniz was getting hit by Carl Williams. Now, yes, Carl Williams isn't really the best striker in the world, but Carl Williams would throw a 1-2 on Jhonata Diniz, and then Diniz would like get hit by both strikes, both the jab and the cross, and then he would move. Like, that's the kind of reactions I'm talking about here, even though he is a glory kickboxer. One thing, though, that I will say is Diniz did find some very, very nice hook counters on the inside, where he can time things quite well, despite not really just having the movement at all to defend strikes. But the reason why I say that is because he's taking on Derrick Lewis, and Derrick Lewis is dangerous. You know, he is 39 years old, and I have kind of been thinking, especially after watching UFC 308, maybe it is time to start fading the older guys towards the end of 2024. But I still think it's a good matchup with Derrick Lewis. Like, Jhonata Diniz is not going to try and take him down like Rodrigo Nascimento was doing, and other fighters that Derrick Lewis has been fighting recently, like Jourdain Almeida. Jhonata Diniz is not attempting a takedown in this fight. He just doesn't. And if anyone's going to attempt a takedown in the fight, it could be Derrick Lewis, because if you do watch his fight against Rodrigo Nascimento, he initiated the clinch quite a bit in that fight. And Derrick Lewis is very dangerous in the clinch when he does break from the clinch, and he can throw his short little hooks in the break from there, and maybe he can catch him there. I know Taito Ivasa, that's actually how he lost to Taito Ivasa, but nonetheless, I do think in this fight, yes, Jhonata Diniz is the glory kickboxer. Yes, he's 8-0. Yes, he's the up-and-coming prospect. I'm still going to go with Derrick Lewis, and Derrick Lewis has been on a bit of a slide recently, but he has been taking on bad matchups, and, you know, like, losing to Serhiy Pavlovich is fine. The loss to Tuivasa hasn't aged that well. Sergey Spivak was just throwing him around like a ragdoll in the wrestling, but Spivak is a little bit of a contender, let's be honest now. So I think that we can kind of look at these fights and think, you know what, Derrick Lewis might still have a little bit in the tank. And he did just knock out Rodrigo Nascimento with a jab to a massive overhand right. And what was happening against Jhonata Diniz with Carl Williams? he was landing the 1-2. So I think that Derrick Lewis is going to land the 1-2 at some point. I'm going to pick Derrick Lewis here. I think he is the underdog. Let's find him. He's plus 145 right now. Jhonata Diniz is minus 170. I do like Lewis in this fight. Now, I was initially like, this is a great fight for Diniz. And then I looked into it a bit more, and I'm like, man, he just doesn't move his head. So it is just going to be one of those heavyweight fights, though. Let's be honest, power is going to meet power. Whoever lands first is going to find the win. I mean, we have seen Derrick Lewis getting face planted quite a few times. Now I believe he face planted against Spivak and Tuivasa. And Diniz hits hard. He does hit hard. And he is like a guy that I was pretty high on. But I just think maybe giving him Derrick Lewis right now might be a bit too much too soon. It's a fun fight though. I am going to side with Derrick Lewis in the matchup. Now we have a fight which, this surely isn't going to be the featured fight or the second to the featured. What is this belt order, by the way? Anyways, Caio Machado fights against Brenton Rodero. These guys are probably going to open up the card. I think Topology's got a bit of a random order. It's going to be fun. That's the thing. But it comes down to if Caio Machado is going to wrestle. That is really what this fight comes down to, because it's at 205 pounds. Caio Machado is going to try and lose a lot of weight to make 205 pounds. And I remember Contender Series was like talking about his diet when he was fighting at heavyweight. Like apparently he was eating like 12 eggs a day or something ridiculous. Like, I don't know, I had to probably rewatch the Contender Series broadcast to really find out what it was. But he was eating a lot of food at heavyweight. So I guess he's just kind of trying to lose a bit of like initial weight and then try and drain muscle to make 205 pounds. I'm not really too sure what his plan's going to be or how he's necessarily going to look on that scale, but he was a pretty big guy at heavyweight, and he was a heavyweight, and now he's coming down to 205. Brenton Rodero, I don't think he's that great, I'll be honest with you. He just kind of is like a very, very loose striker with very wild shots. He doesn't really have much technique at all. He just hits really, really hard. But I guess one thing that he does have over a lot of other people is speed. The problem that I do have with Rodero is that I don't think his grappling is really going to hold up necessarily against Machado. We did see him get taken down by Gadziasilov, and Caio Machado is going to be a very heavy guy on top if he is able to kind of rebound from the weight cut, maybe to put on a bit of weight. But I think that what we've seen from Caio Machado so far is that he's not willing to wrestle as much as I kind of wanted him to when he did come into the Contender Series. He did take on Kevin Szarwalski. Just got PTSD because I picked Kevin Szarwalski because he was a good boxer and he threw 9 strikes in 3 rounds. 9 strikes in 3 rounds. Pathetic performance from you, Kevin. And anyway, Caio Machado, he can wrestle and grapple. But the thing is as well, the guys that he's beaten, aside from Kevin Szarwalski, are old men. I mean, these guys are older than my father. I believe Lee is 54 years old. He was 54 years old when he fought Caio Machado. He's older than my father. Edison Lopez was 44 when he fought him. Like, I just don't know. Anyway, I'm getting way sidetracked here. I think that Brenton Rodero is going to knock out Caio Machado. All that for that. I think that on the feet, all Caio Machado does is run forward with his hands pretty low, throwing hooks. He doesn't really have technique. Neither does Rodero, but Rodero is going to be faster. I think that also the weight cut could be something. Rodero's got the longer reach, which could also be something as well, maybe. I like Rodero by KO. If Machado wins, it's going to be by sub, though, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm picking Rodero. He's the underdog. How many underdogs have I picked? Oh my goodness, this card could go go either way. I'm picking plus 140 underdog, Brenton Rodero. Marc-Andre Barriel fights now against Dustin Stoltzfus. Man, I've got a lot of underdogs on this card. I thought I only had 3. I think I might have 4 or 5 now. But anyway, Marc-Andre Barriel fights against Stoltzfus. Stoltzfus is tough because he just does everything to stay in the promotion, really. He fights against Abus Magomedov, gets knocked out pretty badly, and we're all kind of like, man, maybe that might be the end for Dustin Stoltzfus, and you gotta feel pretty bad for him. But then he gets a win against Pillow Hands Punahele, somehow, because Pillow Hands Punahele gassed out, and then he fought at 170 as well. It was weird. Anyway, and then he lost to Bruno Ferreira. I feel like now if he lost to Marc-Andre, this might be it for Stoltzfus. I don't really know for sure, as Marc-Andre is a guy that the UFC were pretty high on at some point, gave him a ranked fight against Chris Curtis. But I think in this fight, though, It's just not a good matchup for Stoltzfus, man. I know that Stoltzfus does have very good grappling, but I don't think he's going to get the fight down to the ground against Marc-Andre Barriol, who just kind of is a pretty big boy for 185 pounds. And I do like Marc-Andre Barriol's style quite a lot. It just hasn't quite worked, unfortunately, to some of the higher level competition at 185 pounds. Andre Barriol, there's a lot of pressure forward boxers on this card, because that's what he is. He will pressure forward a lot, and he will clinch up a lot, but when he does, he has you up against the cage, and that's where he throws a lot of strikes. He throws a lot of his strikes when he's got you backed up against the cage. And that's kind of the extent of his style. Yes, he can get takedowns, but for the most part, I would say that is what his best asset is. I think on the feet, he's going to be better than Dustin Stoltzfus, who probably is going to want to fight from range and throw the kicks that he does have. But I think that Marc-Andre Barriol's pressure is going to be a little bit too much. I did actually pick Marc-Andre Barriol to defeat Chris Curtis. Hindsight's 2020. He did lose the fight, but, you know, I thought that maybe he could pressure Chris Curtis, and he couldn't. But Stoltzfus isn't as good as Chris Curtis is, in my opinion anyway. So I do think that we're going to see Marc-Andre Barriol go out there against Dustin Stoltzfus, pressure him up against the cage, and I think that Marc-Andre Barriol is going to find a lot of success in the boxing when Stoltzfus is moving backwards. Marc-Andre's minus 200, I think that makes a lot of sense, and a lot of people are picking him as well. It's kind of hard to tell if he's going to get the finish, but I am going to pick Barriol by KO. This is a guy that does have a lot of power. He's unfortunately a guy that's been on the receiving end of a lot of power as well in his career. He did KO Marquez. That was a beating on Marquez that he put him on, and since then hasn't really done too much in the finishing department. But I do think here against Stoltzfus doesn't really have the greatest he doesn't really have the greatest chin, and it's quite sad to see. But I think we are going to see Barriol go out there and find that success. Now Rose Namajunas fights against Erin Blanchfield, and I'm pretty sure Namajunas is plus 100 here against Blanchfield, and she is, so that's another underdog. I mean, I'm going to count them up at the end of the card. This is a lot of them. This card is going to go one way or the other for me, really. It's going to be brilliant, or it's going to be terrible. Blanchfield, I was so high on her. I really was. And then she fought, where was it? She fought Taila Santos. I was like, man, she just didn't look that good against Taila Santos. She just didn't. And I just thought, you know what, it's time to fade her. So I picked Manon Fiorot to defeat her. And that's just kind of what happened. Now, if you do watch Erin Blanchfield's fights, she is a pressure forward fighter, like most fighters on this card. But she gets most of her takedowns in the clinch and kind of by trying to, like, big brother her opponents and pull them down. She's not really shooting for a double leg. Like, I mean, not really women MMA fighters actually do shoot for double legs, but she's not really going in and just kind of picking up and putting her opponents down. She's really got to work for those takedowns and drag them down. And I think that now, at this point, Rose Namajunas has been at 125 pounds for so long, she can find at the range. She can use her kickboxing, which is going to be much, much better than Erin Blanchfield, even though for some reason, for one fight, Erin Blanchfield looked like Tyson Fury in there against Jessica Andrade. I don't know how, but she was able to outstrike Jessica Andrade. I mean, it was short notice Andrade, but I was still kind of shocked by it. Made me think that Erin Blanchfield had made improvements in the striking, which she hasn't. But nonetheless, I think that Rose Namajunas is going to have just kind of the better movement. She is probably going to have to be on the outside here on the back foot, but she can use those kind of shots that we actually just saw Max Holloway. I know Max Holloway just got knocked out, but Max Holloway was using front kicks pretty effectively against Ilia Topuria. He was using push kicks pretty effectively against Ilia Topuria, and his jab to kind of keep Topuria at his range. And even Shadowput Magomedov was doing it, and so was Armand Petrosian. And Rose Namajunas does that herself. She is a rangy striker. She's a kickboxer now, even though she started out as a grappler. And I think this fight is going to really be won on the feet for Rose. It comes down to, do you think that Erin Blanchfield can get the takedowns often? I don't think that she can get the takedowns often. And I think it is just going to come down to Rose Namajunas doing more on the feet over the course of... And this has got to be a 3-round fight, right? It's 5 rounds. Wait, when was this 5 rounds? That makes it even better for Rose, I think, actually, honestly. Rose Namajunas, way more 5-round experience. We just saw her go 5 rounds against Tracy Cortez, who... Similar stylistic matchup, and that fight was at elevation, but Tracy Cortez was so unserious. I mean... she did it. She showed up on like 5 days' notice or something to the elevated area, Salt Lake City, I think it must have been, or something like that. And then had like those long eyelashes in, those fake eyelashes in as she was fighting. Super unserious fighter. Rose Namajunas was able to just beat her up. Similar stylistic matchup, except I think that Cortez's boxing is better than Blanchfield's. So Do you think Erin Blanchfield can just go out there and bully Rose Namajunas is what it kind of comes down to. And if I hadn't seen Blanchfield fight Fiorot or Santos, I would have said yes, I think that she can. But after seeing those two recent performances from Blanchfield, which just hasn't looked that great, I'll be honest with you, I just can't confidently pick her against Rose. And I think that Rose, at 125 pounds, although I was very skeptical of the move initially, because I was like, like Rose wasn't that big at 115, but now I think she's going to be small at 125. Like, I mean, Alexa Grasso and I think Valentina Shevchenko probably would have like pretty significant size advantage over her at this weight class. I think that against Blanchfield, who is probably one of the bigger fighters as well, actually at 125, is going to struggle in the striking. I think that Rose is going to be able to keep her at bay with those long shots, and I think she's going to outstrike Erin Blanchfield for 5 rounds. And at the end of the day, even though it doesn't matter in women's MMA for some reason, damage trumps all in the scoring criteria. Plus 100 Rose, I'm going to pick her to win in this matchup. And now we move up to the main event of the card. Brandon Moreno fights against Amir Albazi. And I am picking Brandon Moreno in this fight, and he's minus 165. No, he's not. The odd just changed as I record this video. A bit online, he's minus 157. Amir Albazi is plus 137. And I'm going to pick Brandon Moreno for quite a few reasons in this one here. Now, yes, Brandon Moreno is on a 2-fight losing streak now, but you've got to look at the guys that he lost to and the fact that they were pretty close decisions. He lost a close decision to Brandon Royval, and although I picked Moreno with confidence, I thought that Royval did win the fight, I'll be honest. And then against Alejandro Pantoja, I'll admit, I picked Pantoja, and I thought that Pantoja won that fight initially 4 rounds to 1, but after watching that fight over and over again now, because Pantoja is an active champion, and I love him for it, Pantoja won 3 rounds in that fight. And I do think that Pantoja really stole it in the first, with the first and the fifth, and I think it was the second, was it the third, or the fourth, whatever. I know for a fact now, after watching that Pantoja won 3 rounds against Moreno, even though some people try to justify Moreno winning, you can't give Moreno 3 rounds. But anyway, tangent aside, he's taken on Amir Albazi, who I think has actually looked a little bit unimpressive somewhat recently. He took on Kai Kara-France. That was his last fight, and I thought that Kai Kara-France won the first round and the fourth and the fifth. And Amir Albazi won the second and the third because he got the takedowns and he got the ground and pound going. But I thought that Kai Kara-France outstruck him in round 1. And he outstruck him in rounds 4 and rounds 5. A lot of people really think that Kai Kara-France won the fight, and I think that Kai Kara-France did win the fight. But it is what it is. Prior to that, though, he fought against Alexandr Costa. Alexandr Costa fought him on short notice. This was Alexandr Costa's debut in the UFC on short notice, and he took the first round off Amir Albazi by being the better boxer. And who is Alexandr Costa's primary training partner? Brandon Moreno. And they train together because Diego Lopez coaches Moreno, Costa, and Alexa Grasso. And I think on the feet, Brandon Moreno's got good boxing. Now, he's got that nice jab, probably the best jab at 125. I don't think many people can really dispute that necessarily. And as long as the fight is on the feet, it's going to be Brandon Moreno's world. I don't really think that Amir Albazi's striking is going to compete with Moreno's striking at all, really, I'll be honest with you guys. So this comes down to the wrestling of Amir Albazi. And although I think that Amir Albazi can get the takedowns, because we did see Moreno get taken down quite repeatedly by someone like Alejandro Pantoja, Alejandro Pantoja presents a striking threat that I don't think Amir Albazi necessarily has. And another thing as well about Amir Albazi is he is a tank at 125 pounds, but his cardio is not there. I mean, Kai Kara-France really took the 4th and the 5th off him pretty easily, because Albazi was gassed. He had nothing left. So I think that Moreno, we've seen Moreno fight 5 rounds before. We've seen Moreno fight hard 5 rounds before. The fight against Royval, that was a hard 5-round fight. The fight against Pantoja, that was a hard 5-round fight. And even you can go all the way back to the Davison-Figueiredo situation where he was getting unlimited title shots for no reason. 5-round fights, and they were tough 5-round fights, So I do think that in this fight, we're going to see Moreno have the much better cardio. We've seen Moreno go 5 rounds 2 times in a row now, even though in losing efforts. I think that Moreno still is not even 31 years old yet. And Amir Albazi, he's just not going to have the same striking as Moreno. He's not going to have the same cardio as Moreno. And I think that's what it comes down to, man. I do like Brandon Moreno to win a decision in this fight against Amir Albazi. Maybe he can get a late finish, but although Moreno did finish quite a few opponents, actually, he did finish Kai Kara-France and Davison-Figueiredo. I still don't necessarily view like Moreno as someone that was like, man, like he's definitely going to get the finish. I think that Moreno is a dangerous guy in the ground and on the feet, but I don't necessarily think I can just go out there and pick him to win by finish against Albazi. So picking Moreno to win there is the main event. I'm pretty confident in him, I'll be honest with you guys. I mean, Amir Albazi hasn't fought for a while, not really too sure why, but now that we're here, why don't I just talk about all of the underdogs that I have picked. Hopefully that was a pretty smooth transition to this outro. I did count up the amount of underdogs that I do have on the card, and it turns out I have 6, and it could be 7 if Romanov turns into an underdog, but I think money's coming in on Romanov, so it's pretty likely that he is just going to close as the favorite. So that's a lot of underdogs. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I am in the middle of exams at the moment, so I'm not really expecting to record videos outside of my UFC predictions right now, but of course I will still be doing some stuff on the We Want Picks website, which is $9 per month with my code ARTIN. Would really appreciate it if you did sign up using my code. It does support me quite a lot, and you do get quite a bit of pretty decent content on that WeWantPicks.com website. So with all of that being said, yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one.